Hi gamers, it's Marina. Today we have more reveals. This time around we got undead cards, so let's jump into it. Our first new minion we have today is Museum Mummy, a 2-star with a battle cry, summon a 1/1 skeleton. This card seems pretty underwhelming. You get an extra 1/1 on your board. If you're buying this on turn 3, sure. Otherwise, this doesn't seem like the best card. Next, we have a 4-star Cadaver Caretaker Death Rattle, summon for 1/1 skeletons. Now, I know the first thing you're going to say is summoning 4 1/1s on your board isn't the best, because if this thing gets hit early, it doesn't have room to summon. So we're going to pause and take a look at this in a second. The next card we have is Prosthetic Hand. This was already shown off in the mech reveal, but it's an undead mech that has magnetic reborn and magnetizes to mechs or undead. So this is a easy, reliable way to give your undead reborn and your mechs. Alright, these two next cards are the ones that really show what they're trying to do new with undead here this season. The first we have is a 4-star Thundering Abomination, replacing the old Abomination. It used to be an Avenge that grew every time something died. Now, we have Thundering Abomination. Whenever you summon a minion in combat, give it +2/+2. But if there's no space, gain +2/+2 permanently. So this is the first card where you can see summoning things in combat is going to be sort of a new method for undead. You're going to try to build around summoning a bunch of things that won't have room to spawn. How viable that's going to be? Well, let's look at the next card too. The next card is Catacomb Crasher. It's a 5-star. Whenever you would summon a minion that doesn't fit in your warband, give your minions +1/+1 permanently. When I first saw this, this reminded me of the Iridescent Skyblazer from Beasts, where when a beast gets damaged, you give another friendly beast +1/+1. And I thought they were pretty much 1/1, and then I realized this says give your minions, like all of them on your board, +1/+1 permanently. I don't know how this is going to stack up against having something like Skyblazer on your board. I don't know how quickly this is going to steamroll into scaling. But I imagine if you have a board full of things that are reborning and spawning other things, this might be okay. Obviously, the play is going to be to play things like this Cadaver Caretaker on your board, or 2 of them in the front of your board, where it's dying and spawning a bunch of things that won't fit. I think it's definitely interesting. We're going to look at some trinkets where there's even more synergy with this kind of build. Overall, combat methods like this are okay. Sometimes they feel really frustrating, like there's not as much counterplay. But on the other hand, if minions are death rattles and they're getting really beefy to where they might not be dying in the right order the person wants, there's some risk with this kind of setup. Moving down to our minions that are returning, we have a Xylobones. It looks like the only undead that is returning. There's no changes to current undead. Xylobones was a 3-star. After you summon a minion in combat, gain +2 health permanently. I don't know if this is being tweaked in the way it works to trigger when you summon something that doesn't fit on your board, so that it has that same kind of synergy as the previous minions we saw. Because I feel like this only worked when you had a room to summon the minion previously. For our minions leaving, we are getting rid of a Hateful Hag, Nightbane Ignited, Hungering Abomination, and Sister Death Whisper. 3 of these I have no problem with. The one that really shocks me is Nightbane Ignited leaving, because that just opens the huge question of what is happening with dragons, because Nightbane was a huge part of the combat scaling dragons build. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait 2 more days before they reveal the new dragon cards. Moving on to trinkets. Our lesser trinkets, our first one is Artisanal Urn. Your undead have +3 attack. This seems okay. This applies to minions that are summoned too, so pretty decent. The next one is Comfy Coffin. After you cast a tavern spell, your undead have +1 attack this game, wherever they are. I love this. I already think that Azurite builds are so fun. This essentially allows you to play that kind of Azurite build with Undead. And you don't even need a minion on your board to do it, just this trinket. Our next trinket is Eternal Portrait. Get an Eternal Knight. Start of combat. Give your Eternal Knights Taunt and Reborn. This seems okay. A little underwhelming. If you already have an Eternal Knight by turn 6, you get this, and now you have double Eternal Knights. Sure. Our next one, Feral Talisman. Your minions have +2/+1. I think this is one of the worst trinkets I've seen so far. Staff of the Scourge. Avenge 5. Give a random friendly minion Reborn. Avenge 5 is a lot, but if we're summoning a ton of minions in combat, I guess so. If your undead scaling is really high, then this will probably be a good card. Our last lesser trinket is Twin Sky Lanterns. When you have space, summon a copy of the first minion you summon each combat. This seems very different. You wouldn't want to run this on a board where you're just spawning a bunch of 1/1s. This feels like you would want to run this on a board where you have something like Atrocities that are going to spawn this giant minion. Or even an Octosari if that's still a card in the game. This seems like a strange choice as an undead trinket, but we'll see what it looks like in play. For greater trinkets, we have Artisanal Urn. Your undead have +7 attack. Yeah, this seems okay. Our next one, Bronze Timepiece. Start of combat. Set each of your minions' attack and health to the higher of the two. This already seems like one of the best trinkets I've seen. By far the best one in the undead reveals so far, but even in most of the ones I've seen so far. For anyone confused, this basically means if you have a minion with 200 attack and 1 health, it will take the 1 health and bring it up to match the 200 attack. Or vice versa. If it has 200 health and 1 attack, it'll gain health to match and become a 200/200. And this will happen for all of your minions. This is not restricted to just your undead, so I think this is a huge trinket. Next, we have Butcher's Sickle. Get a Butchering and a random undead with a death rattle. At the start of each turn, repeat this. I like this one. I think this is neat. Does it stack up against some of the other really strong greater trinkets we've seen? I don't know, but this is already better within a couple turns than like Artisanal Urn that we have over there. Because Butchering, if you're not sure, is the spell that lets you destroy an undead and give its tier value in attack to all of your undead for the rest of the game. Our next greater trinket is Comfy Coffin. This is a better version of the last one we saw. Give your undead +2 attack every time you play a spell this time. I still think this is really good, particularly if you already have the other coffin and you want to stack. You're just gonna keep rolling into something really big. Feral Talisman, your minions have +5/+3. This is obviously a bit better than the lesser one, but I don't know. If you're going up against a board with these giant minions, +5/+3 on your spawners is not going to make that much of a difference. This seems only viable if you're running a board full of spawners to really get the maximum value out of this. Board Keychain, your minions from tier 3 or lower have +6/+4. This feels like a worse version of what Feral Talisman is trying to do. Not all of your minions get them, and what you have to remember is anything that spawns is considered a 1-star. So this basically applies to anything that spawns out of another minion. Will get this 6/4 buff. It's a 1/1 more than the 5/3 that all your minions would get. I don't know. I don't really like either of these. Our next card is a Minion of the Sire. Whenever you would summon a minion that doesn't fit in your warband, give your minions +4 attack. This isn't permanent. This is just for the combat, but this is an extra little bit if you are going that route with trying to spawn a bunch of things in your warband during the combat. Our next trinket is Reinforced Shield. Whenever you summon a minion, give it Divine Shield, up to 4 times per combat. If you have Wild Undead scaling already, this seems pretty good. Our next greater trinket, Rivendare Portrait. Get a Titus Rivendare. At the start of combat, give your Titus Rivendare's stealth. This seems pretty cool. You have to think of this as a worse version of the quest where you just get double death rattles because you do need a card slot. Rivendare being stealthed means it's not going to get hit as easily. We did lose Zap, so Zap is no longer a viable option for this. Although White Mane could still give this taunt, but it being stealthed means that the taunt doesn't really matter. And our last greater trinket here is Twin Sky Lanterns. When you have space, summon 2 copies of the first minion you summon each combat. Same thing I said about the other one. You probably want to use this with something that's going to spawn a really big minion so that you can get extra copies of that. Overall, Undead feel like they're in a pretty strong place. I will be excited to see how they play when the new season actually drops. Something I am surprised by is how many trinkets we got here today that are tied to Undead in some way, shape, or form, compared to what felt like only a handful for Naga, or the pirate ones yesterday. This is a lot of trinkets that they're revealing with a single tribe. Anyway, thank you for joining me today. I hope you had fun. This is real cool to talk about all these things and look at all the new card reveals. Join us again. We have 2 more reveals the next 2 days. Tomorrow's Beasts, and then we have Dragons and Murlocs the next day. Make sure you subscribe so you can catch the next videos, and I'll see you soon.